Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Well, welcome everybody. We're very lucky to have Scott Jensen visiting us today, and Scott is an old friend from a long time ago. He used to come and spend time with our group many years ago, and has done various bits of work with us over the years. Scott's at Google now, but actually he and I were at Apple at the same time, except I was an intern, and Scott you were working on the Newton and also System 7 design, was that right? Yeah, so I don't think we ever actually bumped into each other when we were there. And then, since then, Scott spent time working for Symbian. You were a product designer at Symbian, is that right? Director of Design. And more recently at Google, in charge of mobile UI.
I did the first Google Mobile Maps.
Okay.
And then I was creative director of product design for a
Right.
while.
So lots of different roles. Also, Scott gave the closing plenary at Chi last year. And has written a great book called The Simplicity Shift, which he wrote he was just explaining at the British Library some years ago, about 10 years ago now, isn't it? Yeah. So we're very lucky to have him here today, and he's had a mishap with his laptop, which he may or may not explain. But so no slides, which is a nice, refreshing change for us. So welcome, Scott.
Well, but they're really, really good slides. I'm a Keynote junkie, and I work really, really hard to make sure I've got no bullet points and lots of animations. And I don't have any of that today. So, but with a group like this, I don't want to give my full-on talk. I've actually been in the UK since, well, I've been traveling back and forth a bit, but I was at Cardiff a week ago at the WebIS conference, and last Friday I was at Full Frontal, the JavaScript development conference, and I kind of have my full 45-minute kind of like roadshow. And I feel like with a crowd like this, I can get to the point quite quickly, explain what I'm working on right now, and then open it up for questions. So I really appreciate that's a little bit more interesting to do it that way anyway. So specifically, the backstory is that I was at Google for a number of years. I left, creative director for org design. And one of the stories that kept coming up was that when clients would come, we tried to get them to do a web page first. But this is, a couple years ago when everybody was kind of like, I have to have a mobile app. Apps are awesome. I even wrote a blog post called App Myopia because I was so tired of people just being, focused on that. And then we would do an app for them, and then they'd come back, 4 or 5 months later and kind of, no one's installing our app, And whenever people talk about native versus web, they always get stuck on the fact that native scrolls smoother or has a better UI, and that's true, but it's kind of moot if nobody installs it, right? So that was just kind of one thing that kind of parked in my brain. And then a kind of orthogonal thing was this idea that smart devices today are all requiring that you have an app to interact with them. Nest, Withings, bathroom scales, the Fitbit. All these things require an app, which is fine. It's like the only choice you have. But if you believe in Moore's law at all, there's probably going to be millions of these things. And I think the math just doesn't work out. I mean, you're just not going to install millions of apps. And even if you don't personally own millions of devices, the point is that long tail will kick in. And if I'm passing a vending machine in Berlin, I'm not going to download an app to buy a candy bar, right? We actually had a phrase for it at Frog. We kind of called it the thin crust of effort. It's like the amount of effort it takes to install an app has to be amortized across the number of times you use it. So if you're using Snapchat or Facebook or whatever, of course you'll install the app. That's perfectly fine. But if you're going to use it one time, that then makes no sense whatsoever. So that was the problem. It was fundamentally a UX problem. And I started searching for a technological search for it, just to what we could do. And in fact, it's kind of exactly what the web is good at. The web is good at the long tail of almost anything. And if you stop thinking about applications and you think more about, say, data, so like this bus stop can tell me when the next bus stop is, or this movie poster can tell me, show times, or frankly, a lost dog could have a kind of a phone number as to how to rendezvous with the owner. These are all micro things, very, very long tail, very, very trivial, but I'm not going to have an app for each one of those things. It makes no sense. So the conclusion I came to is that the web needs a discovery service. because we get so excited about the DOM in the browser and all the things that go in that little white rectangle, and it's pretty cool. It's done a lot of stuff, but the fact is that above this DOM, we have this archaic, horrible, medieval thing called the URL prompt, whose major claim to fame in the last 25 years is if I hit T, it autocompletes to Twitter, you know. And so we've taken the most amazing rendering engine on the planet, and we've put a DOS prompt on top of it. I have to be careful. I'm at Microsoft. I have to be careful about DOS. But I think you guys are beyond DOS prompts, too. Right? So the point is that we have continued to labor this amazing system with a very kind of 80s technology where I have to type www.cnn. It's like, that's insane. It's kind of really backwards. And mobile phones are bristling with sensors. So why can't we somehow automate that process? Hence the need for a discovery service. So I tried a bunch of different technologies. I tried kind of piggybacking on Wi-Fi SSIDs. I worked on Bluetooth 3, which is a disaster, the classic Bluetooth disaster. And then Bluetooth 4 came along, and it was just the right kind of thing. It kind of had that UDP mentality where it just was just a broadcast thing. It was connectionless. So what we've come up with, and this is an open source project. We have a GitHub. We announced it last month. I'm kind of like on tour to talk about it. And so what we have is we're using the advertising packet of Bluetooth Low Energy. By the way, just how many people have kind of a running understanding of how Bluetooth Low Energy works? Just curious. Yeah, that's fine. Because I don't want to get too geeky on you guys, but it's just like it's got some really lovely properties. And the main one is the advertising packet. It just sends out this packet, and it's completely connectionless. It just goes and goes and goes. And so you can be in a room with 10,000 people, and they all get the packet. Most of the time, but you know, it is radio. But the point is, you know, they usually do. So we put in the advertising packet the actual, you know, CNN.com. We're not doing an ID. We're not doing a lookup service. We literally want to just give you the URL, because the whole purpose here is to not only be open but to be federated, so that we get rid of this kind of lock-in that requires you to go through a centralized server. There actually is an iPhone app that uses iBeacon. So that if you take the ID, you look it up, and you convert it into a URL, and you go to it, but it completely misses the point of the web. It's a centralized server. That server goes down, and you're toast. We want to, you know, have this beacon take me to CNN, and I just go straight there. There's no intermediary at all. So that's what we're working on. And the way it works is that just once a second, it just broadcasts, and that's all it does. I mean, there's nothing else to it, right? And then the phone comes along, and the phone has got an application. And I totally appreciate the irony that I'm asking you guys to install an app. It's not use an app anymore. I mean, I get, but this is a prototype, right? We're just trying to just you know, bang the rocks together and just see what happens, right? So we're using it kind of as an injection mechanism to get this into the system. So you install the app, and it behaves like an operating system extension. And we have it running on iOS and Android right now. And so you you unlock the phone. It shows up like I can see 3 beacons, and you click on it. It just shows you the 3 that are nearby. And then you click on it, and then it just takes you there. I mean, it's really, that's it. It's not a complicated technology. The thing that we're doing right now is to just simply use the power of the URL so that it can be used in multiple ways. So for example, if you blanket a building with the same URL, we dedupe it so that we only show you the one, so that you kind of have the same URL wherever you go. That's a trivial thing to do. The thing we haven't put in yet, we're thinking about it, is if you do a hash in the URL, so say you go, you know, coolcafe.com / you know, hash 01 and then 02 and 03, and you put 1 underneath each, you know, table in the cafe, you would also ignore everything past, so you'd only show that you're in Cool Cafe, but when you actually click on it and make your order, it would actually send the 03, and then you'd place your order, it would know where you're from, and then the food could be delivered to your table. This is the metaphorical example, but it shows you the power of URLs. But because there's a microprocessor in here, you could say something, you know, ampersand T equals 24, and it would be a temperature sensor, and it could just put the temperature in the URL if you wanted to. Or the URL could be a rotating token to give you security and anti-spoofing. So we feel there's an awful lot of flexibility and value of using URLs. The other thing is we find that there's 3 ways in which this could be used. The obvious way is that it's just a better QR code, right? But I hate using that example because QR codes kind of suck, and everybody thinks that that's cool that you're a better QR code. But I can do 50 at once from 50 meters away. I mean, it's a big difference. So the idea there is I'd go to a bus stop. The bus stop would tell me that the next bus is coming in 3 minutes. Really nothing fancy at all. I actually think it's very transformative. The more we play with this, the more the idea that anything can give me information, from a cat to my luggage to a toaster oven, can give me support information. I think that there's an awful lot of really useful, if trivial, things where everything can basically just talk a little bit more. So we're kind of calling that just like the web poster model. The next one is what we call cloud pass-through. So I bought a vending machine on Craigslist. I rented a truck and I picked it up. I almost threw it my back. They're really heavy. And I brought it in and I just ripped all the guts out. The best part was that it had a little bill thing that takes bills. And when I opened it up, there was $27 in there. The person who sold it to me hadn't cleaned it out. So I got a little discount. But because it was 70s stuff, it was just completely impenetrable. There was no documentation. So I ripped it all out, put it in a Raspberry Pi, and then hooked that up to a WebSocket node server in the cloud. So the URL is being broadcast. I go to the URL, and it says, hey, you want a candy bar? And you click a button. So from my phone, I click on the button, and it basically just does a post event. And that basically just sends it to the server. The server then sends a post down to my Raspberry Pi, and then it just spins a relay, and then it drops the candy. So it goes through the internet. And I am stunned. I mean, as a UX designer, I should know that demos work, right? But it was astounding. I could talk until I'm blue in the face, and then I'd bring all the Chrome VPs by, and they're just grinning because they can drop candy bars as fast as they want to. It's kind of funny that was what got them excited about my project, you know. So it was just amazing. That was it. But people often are critical of this idea because it seems really complicated that you have to have a machine that's sending a Bluetooth signal and having some kind of internet connectivity, Wi-Fi or Ethernet. However, it's changing really rapidly. So there's a company called Sigfox that's French. I don't know if you guys know them. They're making GSM modems in quantity. They're selling them for like $3 or $4. They have annual data plans down to $1. That's a very, very small data plan, so you probably want a bigger one. But the point is, it's getting fairly cheap. So things can become like Kindles. They can have their own. And as things start having their own connectivity, and I have my own connectivity, this URL bridge is just a way for me to kind of talk to it really easily. So that seems like a useful thing to go in the future. The other thing is, but then the third use case is not possible yet, but I think it's the one that people get most excited about, which is I get the URL, I go to the cloud like all the other ones, but then the web page actually has JavaScript in it, which then can open up a Bluetooth Low Energy connection and then connect straight to it. Now, Bluetooth Low Energy has a very simplified model. It just has GAT services. And GAT is kind of like, I support heart rate, I support temperature, or I support any other service. And then you know what that service is, and then you can kind of push and pull values. It's quite limited, but very quick, lightweight. So the intention would be that the vending machine would have a vending machine service, or a parking meter would have a parking machine service. So I go to the URL, go to the cloud, do whatever kind of payment you want to do. I pay for my parking. And then it opens up an encrypted channel, encrypted token to the things with a GAT service, sends it down, and then the parking meter kind of goes, oh, you've got 30 minutes. So the revolution that we had with smart devices was that through applications, the device could kind of steal my screen and have a uniform, well-understood interface on my phone. Well, now you can actually steal the internet connection too. So many people are trying to do smart parking meters in cities, and they're doing crazy things with mesh networks and things like that. Well, it just goes away. It's just gone. You can connect to it. My personal hope is that I'll be able to get a McDonald's Happy Meal with a toy in it. I can just pull up my phone, and we could just play with it right there. Because it's really cheap at this point. I'm ordering these things in quantities of 1,000 for $5. But I was told if I ordered them in 100,000, I could probably get it down to $1. And that's today, right? It's going to get even cheaper. And frankly, at that point, most of the cost is the battery at that point. So you can't do this Bluetooth connection yet. Chrome has a Bluetooth Low Energy library behind the Chrome App Store because it's a permission model thing. However, once this project got a little bit more traction, they got excited. They're now negotiating with Mozilla to say, hey, let's make sure that we just take this thing and make it a standard so that everybody supports it. So that way we can kind of get Bluetooth Low Energy as a library and work through all the permissions issues. Clearly, we want to be careful about that. And that'll probably take 6 to 8 months, maybe longer, to get in the browser. But we're kind of taking the long haul here. So then I think that opens up an awful lot of possibilities. So that's what we kind of call the direct connect model. And we think that's going to be pretty interesting to try that The one other thing I'll tell you is that we've worked really hard to work on privacy and security because people get really worried about things like this. So a couple things. The advertising packet sends out a packet constantly. There is something called a scan response packet, which gives you more information. And we're not using that for two reasons, even though it's very painful because it means our payload is much smaller. If you use a scan response packet, it means that the receiver has to connect back to you, which gives them your MAC address, which means that you can be tracked. So that's a bad idea. We want to avoid what Wi-Fi does. Even though more and more operating systems are scrambling the MAC address, so it could be academic. The other reason we don't do it is that if I send this out to 1,000 people and they all ping me back, they're just going to get clobbered, and the vast majority won't connect. So it's a congestion issue. Bluetooth Low Energy was certainly not designed to handle high volume. It was meant to be like mice and keyboards. It was not meant to broadcast to 100%. So you have to be very careful with that. The next thing that we're doing, and this is why it's all open source, is that the phone will gather the 4 or 5 URLs around, and then it just gathers those up and sends them to a proxy server. And that has two values. One is this proxy server can cache everything because we take the URL and we get the title, the description, and the favicon, which gives you the metadata to display it nicely. That saves the phone from having to scrape everything manually. Huge data savings for the phone. But the other huge privacy implication is that I walk into a mall, I see the stores around me, and the stores kind of go, oh, look at the X proxy server is asking for it. It completely hides the user's interest from, so that they can't see that. And that's a huge benefit as well. A couple people have been really grumpy, and they say, but I have to trust the proxy server. It could catch. I said, well, yes, that's why it's open source. Pick a different one. It's meant to be federated, so you could use the Google app, or you could use the Microsoft app, or you could use, who knows, the Snapchat app. I mean, the point is, it's meant to, we're trying to create effectively two different ecosystems. An ecosystem of totally open URL broadcasting things, and a whole series of most likely proprietary clients that then look at these things. It's kind of equivalent to websites and browsers. And that's what we're calling it the physical web, because we're trying to basically just take the web and just push it into hardware. It's really a very, very straightforward idea. But we're hoping that by open sourcing it and allowing these clients to do their own thing, we can kind of have a more competitive system where people can try different things. If we went through a single centralized server, I think people would get worried. But and some people have even said, oh, I'm going to write a client that uses no proxy server whatsoever. I'm like, good luck. You're going to have a huge data hit on the phone. But that would kind of maybe be and it has a huge privacy issue that when you walk into the mall, the websites now know you're in the mall. So I actually think it's a very bad idea for privacy reasons. But anyway, these are the kinds of things that we're trying to talk about. So we released it a month ago. We've had tremendous press, which was completely surprising and accidental. I think it's because it's so open, and so many Internet of Things are just so app story. They want to lock you into the proprietary system. And Google is really adamant that this cannot be a Google product. This must be an open web project. And we're doing it in such a way right now that we're trying to get comments and feedback. And I'm actually a little disappointed. Almost all of the feedback has been more like tinfoil hat, Google's going to eat my children kind of comments, versus your security is screwed up and you could fix it this way. We're trying to get the criticisms on how to fix them as opposed to, we just don't trust you and you're evil. And that's just, so we're, most people, frankly, I would claim like it too much. I want there to be more criticism. So that's pretty much the majority of my talk. And my slides run the same thing. But as you can tell, I'm trying to prime you guys to ask hard questions and to push back on it. So, and that's what the GitHub is for. We hope you guys raise issues. So that's my overall talk, and I'd be happy to take questions. Yeah.
I'm not totally sure what the difference between Model 2 and Model 3 is. Is it because, why would you use Model 3 if every device already has a GSM connection?
No, that's the whole point, though, is that if I had a McDonald's Happy Meal toy, it would literally have nothing but Bluetooth Low Energy chip in it.
Right.
And that's massively cheaper to make.
Right, and why Bluetooth Low Energy and not something like NFC?
NFC is great, but I have to get on top of it, right? If I want to be in my house and I want to control my stereo system, I don't want to walk over to my stereo system and tap it. I might as well just push the damn on button at that point.
There's nothing fundamental about the fact that I could have a very short range kind of whatever you're calling these things.
Oh, well, these are just basically maker kits. We don't want these to be public. We don't want these to be, we are not going to sell these for much long, we're just giving these away to seed the market. Yeah.
But you call them a web, the
physical
web.
Physical web is a concept.
Right, so I could have physical web objects in the real world that doesn't have to be Bluetooth Low Energy, right?
Oh, no, thanks for bringing that up. We actually, next week, we're going to actually try to support MDNS over Wi-Fi for exactly that reason. In fact, one of the biggest issues with this is that this is great for public spaces, but it allows my neighbor to turn off my TV. Right? That's a huge issue, and we acknowledge that on the GitHub. Right? This is like, if we support MDNS, then of course you're on protected Wi-Fi. The downside with MDNS is that I have three TVs in my house, I'm afraid to say, and I'll get all three. And so one of the things we're toying with is that you could still broadcast the IP address, use MDNS to get the full information, and then use the Bluetooth to kind of say, oh, well, you're actually, of the 17 devices in your house, you're close to this one. And then you just kind of match them up. So we think MDNS is in that way, we're the Discover URLs in the Wild project. We're not the Bluetooth URL project. Bluetooth is just the new black, right? Everyone's using it. Everyone's got their phones. It's the easiest way for us to go right now. Cool. Yeah?
So what are common properties that you might think of data that could be pushed into this kind of protocol? You were saying, so when you put this pound table number or so you use that as an input, could you think of refreshing data, so it would be reactive by default, or like that's a common property that maybe every data source might want to have?
Well, I think there's two separate points here. There's how flexible URLs are, and then there's what kind of metadata could you use, which I think is your question. So we think the metadata was really interesting, and the question then is, what part of the ecosystem does the metadata need to be in, right? We are actually adding support for JSON plus LD, which is effectively a way for any web page to return back a blob of JSON. In fact, we just had a prototype done literally yesterday. I mean, I'm afraid they're really boring. There's a plastic box that beeps. When you push the beep, it changes to a GATT service that lets it be discoverable, so you can set the URL. These are meant to be kind of like Arduino Bluetooth LE devices. Totally not secure. It's just really meant to quickly, prototype something up quickly. So by adding JSON LD in, what we've done is we've supported schema.org actions. So we just did it so that the vending machine does the JSON plus LD, which returns back the GET address, and then the proxy server supports that, and now it goes down to my Android Wear watch. So I walk up to the vending machine, I can see the vending machine, I swipe over and it says get candy, I tap it and it spins and it drops. So, but we're trying to have all this metadata come through the web. We're trying to focus really, really hard to have the Bluetooth part, or possibly the MDNS Wi-Fi stuff, to be just about discovery. In fact, kind of our geeky nickname is that we're the proximity DNS team, and then build and really layer it. And so we build everything. So we don't do any payments, we don't do any identity, we do no security, because we hope that we can kind of layer that on top. And if we stick to our knitting and do that one little thing, we can be really focused. Now, if we think we need to add more to it, we actually have a field of bits that we think is going to be useful to optimize avoiding the round trip to the metadata server. Like, for example, one thing we're talking about is that we can say that I'm captured. So let's say that every light bulb here has a URL associated with it, and it's got a RESTful interface like Hue light bulbs. But I really want to talk to the lighting system, and the lighting system talks to the lights on my behalf. So that bit would be really, really lovely, because I can see them and I can ignore all of them. It's not security, it's more of a hint to the ranking. So I would hide all of those, and I would just show the lighting system. So that's an example of how we could use this bit field. And, but like I said, if you're willing to go to the server, you can get anything you want. It's really an optimization. Yeah?
In the cafe case, or when you have a situation where you have lots of vending machines right beside each other, how do you identify which one you stand in front of?
Yeah, I mean, what we have discovered right now is that we are sorting by signal strength, and it's really lousy. You can kind of be good if you're within a meter, but it's still really bad. So we're thinking is that the vending machine, I mean, clearly if you have a Pepsi and a Coke vending machine, you don't have a problem. If you have 3 Coke machines in a row, That feels like a slightly academic point, but it needs to be discussed. So what we were hoping would happen is that in addition to sending down the command, you would either, the web page would either give you identifying information, but there's also the likely problem that two people can do it at the same time, and we're going to fight for the same candy bar. So when you click on it, it might say, okay, Scott, here's your Snickers. So, but I definitely agree with you. I think this needs to be discussed and figure out ways. I'd like to think we can come up with a solution, though. And it gets much, much easier when you have Bluetooth Low Energy, because then you can do things, I mean, the connection. Because then you could say, you could walk it up to the page, and when the page loads, it connects right to it, and it kind of goes, this one, so then you could really, really solve that problem with that. Yeah?
Scott, you of all people know that, in a way, the kind of technical challenges are tractable. They could be solved, but isn't it more about how this is an infrastructural problem, about how you get these things into the world? And you've mentioned price, which is obviously a big one, but how are you addressing that?
You mean the chicken or the egg problem? Yeah, I mean, effectively what we're trying to do is reinvent SMS from a structural point of view. And we have no illusion that this is a monumentally hard problem. So what we're taking right now is what we're kind of calling the Growl for Macintosh approach. If you guys remember Growl for Macintosh, okay. So it was a program that you would install aftermarket. It gave the Mac superpowers, and then developers had to then take advantage of the API, but they would ask you to install Growl first. And it became quite large, but it slowly worked its way up. And eventually, of course, Apple then just stole the idea and built it in. We're trying to take the same approach, which is to say we want this app to be installed, and it's only meant for research labs and for, so I was at the BBC Research today. They really want to play with this. We just want people to play with it. We want people to get excited by it. We want there to be kind of this demand pull. We want the idea to be vetted and figured out, and basically the community to decide if it's a good idea. That's a really important first step. Then the idea is to have other, the real critical step is to get this built into operating systems. So, or frankly, it's probably better to build into browsers so that Bing and Firefox can both offer their own alternative to it. That's what we really need to get next. So I'm obviously lobbying the Chrome team to put this in behind a flag in a short period of time. At Full Frontal, I met a student who's like, can I port your client to Windows Phone? I'm like, yes! Because frankly, I think it'd be awesome if this shipped on Windows Phone before Android. And I'm very happy to go on record and have it recorded and go public. Because this will not work if it is considered to be a Google first or Google only product. Now, that being said, I'm not answering your question. I'm just telling you how I hope it comes out. I do feel, though, that when you kind of explain it to people and they kind of go, well, the alternative is to use apps for the rest of our life. Well, that's even more intractable. So the question is, we have to kind of develop that kind of desire for it. Let's try this for 4 months and see if we get some traction. And if not, then I think we'll have to try something else, or frankly, give up if nobody wants it. Because let's be really honest, if the community doesn't want this idea, it's not going to happen. Absolutely.
So you're sort of approaching it bottom up, seeding the idea and the technology, whereas you could say the reverse was at the App Store or iTunes, where they said this is the platform and everyone else has to sort of plug into it.
Yeah.
Could you approach it that way? Or?
I just don't think, Apple got away with that. An awful lot of, right now, people are actually fighting Apple more and more on that issue. I think that the world has gotten more sophisticated. I just don't think that works anymore. Especially when you're trying to do something that's kind of as broad as the web. This has to be perceived as the next level of the web. And I just feel like it would just kill it, personally. It's really possible that Google could be the first to market by putting this into a Chrome, and that we may have to do that. But a little me would be a little sad if that was the only thing that would happen. I would really love someone else. In fact, I even pitched, I know Pascal Finette, who's head of research at Mozilla, and I pitched him on this. And I just said, why don't you guys, don't make the Windows OS phone just a phone written in JavaScript. Make it a phone that actually embraces the web. And so I tried that, and they were just too busy with other things. They couldn't do it. So I'm hoping that some platform will use it as a differentiator. Do that first. But I'm not answering your question. I'm just telling you what we're trying. Yeah.
What does battery life, how does that impact the sort of scenarios where you can do, obviously in a vending machine, you don't really need a battery, right? You're plugged into the
mains, right? So
right. Whereas if I had infinite battery life, heck, I could document the construction materials used to build this building, right? And so what's the battery life of these things, and sort of where on a scale do you see your sort of at first taking off?
Well, there's two ways to answer your question. There's the direct question of battery life, and the next one is beacon density, right? Because like, clearly, if I go into a chemist, every bottle of paracetamol will not have one of these things in it. I mean, even if battery life was infinite, that'd be insane, right? But right now, this is a year-old board running a 2032 battery, and it runs for 8 months. If you change the URL every hour, it'll last for about a week, right? So the changing of the URL actually takes a lot of energy. The next generation of this chip should last 2 years, and it'll just keep getting better. We did some power analysis on this and found out that the vast majority of the power is actually taken up by the processor. Bluetooth Low Energy is actually quite efficient. But we really do feel like the world is broken up into two very big camps, those with mains and those with batteries. And, but I'd like to think that for a while at least, if you have something that lasts for 2 years, I think that kind of is quite useful. But I think your use case, though, is that you want to light fire and forget. You just want something to broadcast something forever. And I think we're probably a ways away from that. That'll be a different use case entirely. But frankly, I would think even one thing we haven't talked about, and actually this falls onto your Wi-Fi question, which is once we start getting clients that are harvesting URLs, we could start, frankly, using the web as well. So if a city were to upload, say, a KML file of all the bus stops in the city, you could then make every bus stop have a URL, as long as the client is willing to fire up his GPS and do that. I think that's also another extension to this model we can talk about, which then wouldn't require batteries at all, right? But I think that's kind of a next generation thing. The other comment I'd make, by the way, just to remind me of this. I think taking URLs and going to web pages is going to be considered to be like the really boring thing with this technology. It's the obvious thing to do right now. But if you can imagine that they all have connectivity and they all have RESTful interfaces, you could also imagine that these things could fire up, discover each other, and hit the RESTful interfaces and self-configure. That would be kind of another, I think it's a little bit more science fiction-y, but that's kind of where we could go with this. And not just simply just say, yeah, your dog is lost. So any more questions? Yeah, sure.
What do you do if this is really successful, but 99% of the URLs are valueless and just noise in the person's life?
Yeah. There's many variations of this question. A lot of it is often around spam. Some of it's around phishing. Some of it's around, so there's, I think, there's no silver bullet. I think there's a couple of answers. One is, I think Bing and Google both offer safe browsing APIs and phishing APIs. So that would take care of maybe the first 50 or 60%, right? So you just simply just get rid of the crap. There is a UX issue about how you then kind of organize things. Like what's the primary things. As I hinted before, distance is a meaningless value. We've tried really hard to avoid gathering any user data at all, but we're feeling like we have no choice. At some point, we're going to have to do it, which means if I'm in the mall and I see these 75 beacons, which ones have been clicked on the most? Just kind of use PageRank, kind of that kind of model. If you do it properly and you signal it so that you're not gathering any personal information, it's just anonymized data, I think that'd be incredibly powerful. I also think that we'll have to experiment with different UIs. I mean, right now it's just a list. Most likely we could come up with a much better UI than just a list to say, hey, we're going to show you what's important. So I think we're going to have to grow into that. So it's kind of being overwhelmed versus being spammed. I think they're two different conversations. And again, on the GitHub, we call that out as kind of the next generation, one of the topics we want to explore as well. Because you're right, I'll be thrilled to find one right now. So. Follow-up question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It just made me think that I wonder whether what you're proposing, which I like, is so far from the app model though, because I had this weird experience where I upgraded all of my hi-fi. I bought a new app, I bought a new DVD player, I bought a new TV, and every single one of them had BBC iPlayer built into it.
Yeah.
And there was a sense that it was so cheap to get this functionality in that it didn't really matter if it was all thrown at me, as if it was equal, and suddenly I had to make this strange choice of which particular device I engaged with. It sounds to me like the purpose that device manufacturers are trying to make apps that are dedicated experiences for their particular device. And I wonder whether, even if this is masked by a URL, whether to some extent you're doing the same thing. You're creating a unique URL to a unique experience for that device that, to all intents and purposes, may as well be an app. right? Another thing you could do is just launch the app automatically, and the experience might not be distinct. But I end up in this situation in my living room, for example, where I have these 3 or 4 devices all saying "launch me, launch me, launch me," but they're all kind of, they're all about they're still all about their unique experience. It's still the Sony TV trying to send me to the Sony site, the Samsung Hi-Fi trying to send me to the Samsung site. You see what I mean?
No, I totally agree, and I think, frankly, my toaster oven is probably going to try to sell me extended warranty insurance too, which is so. I mean, to me, this is just the web, and how you use it needs to be discussed and will evolve over time. So I don't want to say that's on top of me and wash my hands of it, but I feel like the alternatives. I mean, I'm trying to solve the problem that you have 20 apps in your house, and you can install them. That's the problem I'm trying to solve. You're kind of, I think, going on to the next problem beyond that, which I agree with, but I would argue that's not the problem I'm trying to solve at this point. Yeah.
I guess I have a related question, because I don't quite see how you solve that problem. You mentioned the Philips Hue light bulb. Now, I've been experimenting with the LifeX bulbs. I've got a dozen of these around my house. And, they come with an app. You can get an iOS app. And that it's kind of problematic. But I don't see how, your comment about the lighting system rather than, so like, let's say that each of the bulbs has got one of your things in it. At some point, I have to talk to the lighting system, and wherever that is sort of implemented, I'm still talking to an app that LifeX wrote or somebody wrote to manage my bulbs.
Right.
So I don't quite see what the real difference is.
Well, the difference would be, in the case of the light bulbs, is that let's take the easiest likely scenario that LifeX writes a light management app, which broadcasts a URL, and then it discovers all of the other LifeX bulbs in the house, and then you go to that app and you configure it, and you just say this is the bedroom, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And then as the app captures each one of those light bulbs, they have RESTful interfaces that says, you're captured, and then it changes that bit, and it flips the bit to be captured. So then what that means then is that when I walk into my house, I just no longer see the light bulbs. I only see the lighting system. Right? So, and that can be taken care of many different ways. This bit was just one example of it. But I think that was the idea, is that if we get more sophisticated systems, I think we want to create systems of systems. We don't want to have everything being at the top level.
Okay, I guess in that sense, LifeX has done that with their mesh network, and you're doing it with...
No, precisely. So and this is the problem with being at Google. Google has so many different projects. I kind of go, how are you related to Nest? I'm like, I have no idea. They're over there, But it's like they have this thread system and so forth. And I'm like, the thread is all about having a backbone and data and an event model, and they're doing all. That's nothing to do with me. If a thread object wants me to discover their web page, that makes things percolate through the network. Good on you, but that's not my thing. So I think, though, that this idea of systems discovering each other and then hiding each other to simplify it for the user and possibly get rid of your issue is the kind of thing that we do have to talk about. Absolutely. Yeah.
You've been saying RESTful interface?
RESTful interface.
What's that?
RESTful interface is a web technology that lets you take any URL and then just add another thing onto the end of it. So, for example, you can say, let's say that like LifeX. I have a LifeX 4723456, which is one of his light bulbs, /info. You hit that web page and it returns back JSON that says, I have a LifeX bulb and here's my commands. And then any other, you just keep adding, it's a clever little trick on URLs. You just keep adding another thing to the URL and it returns back information. Well, it's REST. Does anybody know what REST stands for?
Representational state transfer, isn't it?
Oh, so it's got nothing to do with the word RESTful?
No, it's RESTful. Yeah. So that's just one way in which you can have an HTTP-based system that can communicate. There are others. Yes, sir.
It's kind of about, kind of related to Alex's question about infrastructure, because who's going to agree? How are you going to agree on the APIs? You say, here's the light system. Mm-hmm. Do all light systems have to have light bulbs in them? And essentially the structure of that API that you're exposing.
Oh, absolutely. So I think there's two separate issues. I love to kind of make fun of the fact that the Internet of Things is such a stupid term, and that people confuse the Internet of Things with smart devices. Smart devices are much more tractable, right? I have one app that talks to one device, and it's my washing machine, it's my light bulb, it's my whatever, okay? The Internet of Things is this, Jetsons view where everything talks to each other, and that's just a mess, right? I completely agree with you. I'm trying to solve the smart device problem, right? I have no claim on the Internet of Things problem. Because you're right. So most likely, the dumb thing is that LifeX will have a LifeX app that controls LifeX bulbs, but it won't talk to Hue. Well, I can't solve that problem. And I would argue that that's not a problem that I want to solve. I want those guys to figure it out. In fact, frankly, the Thread project at Nest is trying to tackle that problem, and more power to them. So sorry, I don't want to be cavalier, but I want to make sure we're really. I'm trying to, as you can tell, I'm trying to really draw a very fine line between what I do and what everybody else does. So the GitHub is Google/physicalweb, physical-web.org. My email is scottj@google.com. Very much want to have conversations, and if you guys have other ideas, if you think MDNS is a bad idea, if you think there's another way we should do it, if there's a way to add security, if you think there's a privacy implication we haven't thought about, this stuff needs shaking. So please contact me and let me know. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.